Hamas started to see what was happening in France, started to see what was happening around the world toward getting a Palestinian state, and they toughened their stance. So keep going, Hamas. You might be winning this war eventually. Israel more isolated, Israel more condemned. I think the world is making a mistake on a very moral level and also practical level. We're going to miss again that opportunity. We're going to say, oh, we can just create fiction and fake structures of what statehood looks like without doing the real work. And that's the missed opportunity. It can't just be top down, it's got to be the bottom up. At the bare minimum, it should not be a just blanket recognition of a Palestinian state. It has to come with steps, moves, reforms, changes, revolutions that need to be done by the Palestinian Authority. Macron's got one bullet to shoot here, and he's not doing it right. When we see the Europeans make these announcements, it's very easy to write them off as they're anti-Semites, they're against us no matter what. But if they do something like what you just mentioned, it would make some Israelis say, hold on a second, this isn't just black or white. It's not a zero-sum game. But they need to see that political horizon. And for that political horizon to be there, that can enable the Israeli-Saudi normalization, which would change literally the future of this region.
Can there be a silver lining in the imminent French recognition in Palestinian statehood? Would it really be a reward to Hamas? On August 13, 2025, I hosted Yaakov Katz, a renowned columnist and a former chief editor of the Jerusalem Post, for a conversation on the negotiations in Cairo to end the Israel-Hamas war and free all Israeli hostages. Our conversation covered many topics, and then focused on the pledge of France, Germany, Britain, and other countries to recognize a Palestinian state. Yaakov began by describing his opposition to such a move, but we then converged on the conclusion that it can create some opportunities for Israel as well. You can listen to the entire 45-minute conversation on my Insights podcast. But here is the section where we discuss the possible recognition in Palestinian statehood. I want to actually move on and ask you the following. Today it's August 13. A month from now is the UN General Assembly. A few countries have already pledged to recognize the Palestinian Authority as a state. You said that you don't support this view. First of all, as a stepping stone for the next phase of our conversation, just explain why you don't support it.
Well, I don't support it right now because I think that what these countries like Britain, France, Australia, and others, Canada, are doing is they're emboldening Hamas. They're showing Hamas, and it's no secret, there were talks, there were negotiations that were being held. Steve Witkoff had led a delegation a few weeks ago to Doha. Israel had sent a delegation to Doha. And Hamas started to see what was happening in France, started to see what was happening around the world, this momentum towards getting a recognition of a Palestinian state. And they toughened their stance and position. And both negotiation teams were pulled back. First, Witkoff pulled back the American one, then Israel pulled back its one. Now there's a new attempt. The Egyptians are involved, maybe the Turkish are involved, but the talks aren't really going anywhere. We even heard the president just a few days ago say that he doesn't see a deal happening anytime soon. I mean, Hamas doesn't have an interest. Why would it want to give up the hostages? What interest does it have right now? So Israel's trying to put the pressure where it can, but it sees that the world is cracking down not on Hamas, it's cracking down on Israel. So keep going, Hamas. You might be winning this war eventually. Israel more isolated, Israel more condemned. So I think the world is making a mistake on a very moral level and also practical level. But I also think is that it's premature, right? The Palestinian Authority has not gone through the reforms that are required. It wouldn't be a state that's viable anyhow. What state are we even talking about? It's not a state. So the recognition will just cause damage to Israel, will just further isolate Israel. So if that's what they're after, good, that's what they're going to get. But it's not going to give the Palestinian, bring them any closer to a state. And we're going to miss again that opportunity. We're going to say, oh, we can just create fiction and fake structures of what statehood looks like without doing the real work. And that's the missed opportunity. So I think that the world could be saying, listen, we want to give you Palestinians a state. Let's all work together to create the foundations that are needed. It can't just be top down. It's got to be the bottom up. And that's the practical way to move forward.
So basically, I think we could spend a whole hour actually analyzing why Hamas feels it's the upper hand. I think a major element here was the huge failure of the Gaza Humanitarian Fund and the way it was managed. So I think that's even bigger than a lot of the other things that are going. And second thing is, we have to actually say Hamas is against the two-state solution. So,
Yes.
so in some ways, you could say that the strong move that establishes the two-state solution is in contradiction to Hamas ideology. But I do
No,
want to.
but the condemnations of Israel and the isolation diplomatically of Israel, that's in Hamas's interest.
Yes, but that is maybe related more to the catastrophic
humanitarian
failure
aid.
Humanitarian aid as opposed to
Right.
weeding out Hamas. There are a few things, Yaakov, and you're talking to a lot of people in the Middle East. There are a few things that everybody agrees upon, and one of them is Hamas has to go. I don't know of a single entity that is involved in the political process that doesn't acknowledge that Hamas cannot continue to lead the Palestinian entity. This is the first thing. Second thing, everybody understands that there cannot be reconstruction of Gaza as long as Hamas is there. So there's actually a huge coalition against Hamas now, and in favor of removing Hamas. And that's why I think that just saying that recognizing the Palestinian state is kind of a support for Hamas, there is more to it than just that element. But I do want to say, let's assume that the train left the station, okay, that they are going to be recognizing. What would you advise them in terms of how they recognize so that it also serves key interests, not just of Israel, but of a peaceful resolution, of moving toward a peaceful coexistence between Israel and Palestinians? Is this also an opportunity and not just a threat? That's what I'm asking.
I mean, at the bare minimum, and again, I don't agree with this move, but at the bare minimum, it should not be a just blanket recognition of a Palestinian state. It has to come with steps, moves, reforms, changes, revolutions that need to be done by the Palestinian Authority. I mean, if just one small example, if I were to hear Macron say, I'm willing to recognize the Palestinian Authority, I think he's misguided, by the way, completely, Macron. But if I were to hear him say, I want to recognize the Palestinian state if, and I'll give them recognition, if they stop the pay for slay scheme, right? They stop paying salaries to terrorists in Israeli prisons. I would say, okay, at least I see something that he's understanding there is change before. There's change required. That's not what he's saying. And that's not what the other countries are saying. I think that's a way to potentially affect change. Will the Palestinians embrace that? Maybe they would. Maybe there would be a change. I doubt it, but it's possible. So Macron's missing, he's got one bullet to shoot here, and he's not doing it right.
So basically, but you're not ruling out the possibility that if made in a certain way, such a recognition could actually tame Palestinian expectations. For example, let's say the French come out and say, hey, there's going to be a Palestinian state, but you have to understand that if there is a Palestinian state, there's no more Palestinian refugees. They can go to the Palestinian state or stay outside, but there is no more Palestinian refugees. And UNRWA has to go because the Palestinian state will need to take over responsibility for its civilians. I think these could be positive indications of the general direction we need to move into. And of course,
I'll tell you something else, Giddy, and you make a very good point with what you're referring to, the refugees in UNRWA, is that it will be also harder to some extent to delegitimize what Europeans are doing here in Israel, because right now it's very easy, right? The Israeli people are traumatized by October 7th. We're still shaken in our core, and we're still traumatized by the last almost 2 years of war. The losses, the casualties, the fatigue of the soldiers and the reservists and the economy and the country everywhere. But if we were to see, so when we see the Europeans make these announcements, it's very easy to write them off, as we see that our government does, and many Israelis do, is they're anti-Semites, they're against us no matter what. But if they do something like what you just mentioned, that would be something that it would make some Israelis say, hold on a second, this isn't just black or white. It's not a zero-sum game. There's gray. Maybe it's not. And then it would be harder for Netanyahu or Ben Gvir or Gideon Sar, whoever it is, to say they're just anti-Semites. They're just against us. The Germans are back to being Nazis once again, like Itamar Ben-Gvir dared to say about a country that we might disagree with what they're doing right now, but a country that is our greatest friend probably in the world after the United States.
And the source of our what is called our strategic option.
Yeah.
So
The submarines that we have. Exactly. So, I mean, to talk that way about a country that helps us literally survive is just delusional. I mean, we could talk for hours about this, but I mean, there's just like a whole other, there's all other thing going on right now, which I know you know about. But obviously with Iran, and a bit off topic what we're talking about, but just another thing. It's another example of Israeli government dysfunction. The Iran now, in the aftermath of the attack, it's to stop them from rebuilding, we got to get Iran into a new nuclear deal. Everybody knows that, right? So one of the levers to get the Iranians back into a nuclear deal is the sanctions, snapback sanctions. Now, there's a window to snap back those sanctions. It comes up in October, right? Now, who can snap back the sanctions? Well, it's the British, it's the French, and it's the Germans. It's the only countries that are part of the JCPOA, and they're in Europe right now. Now, it's not America because they pulled out of the JCPOA. Now, who is Israel fighting with right now in Europe? It's the British, it's the French, and it's the Germans. Now, we need them to threaten Iran with snapback sanctions. What are we not thinking about that? Like, where is the responsible government here? Just another example of how this government's not really considering the bigger strategic implications of what it's doing.
So basically, first of all, I agree, and we could speak about other elements as well. But I do want to say that in many ways, paradoxically, our government, is pushing itself into this moment of truth that is kind of a self-inflicted political conundrum, because the moment you say a comprehensive deal to end the Gaza war, the moment you say that my alternative to a deal is to occupy Gaza and effectively become responsible for 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, you're pushing yourself into these historic decisions. And in these historic decisions, because you're speaking about the comprehensiveness of the deal, you're going to have to deal with the long-term vision of what the Palestinian people will be. So therefore, you're sort of funneling yourself into being tackled by the whole issue of a Palestinian state. So now come the Europeans from the side, and they're saying, hey, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. So it may make sense to say to the Europeans, you know what, publicly we're against you, we reject this, but privately, if you say A, B, C, D, we can live with it. And that may open the door for a political horizon, what the Saudis call an irreversible path to state, which then allows the Arab force to come in, which then allows pushing Hamas out, which then allows, all these things to happen in multiple theaters. So I'm just sorry.
Yeah. And it allows for potential Saudi normalization.
Exactly.
Which was an option even a year ago into this war, a year into the war, and now has fallen very, very far away. And I think that one of the main reasons, of course, the Saudis aren't happy with the continuation of the war. They're not happy with the casualty toll in Gaza, the destruction in Gaza. They're not happy with a lot of that. But they want to see Hamas removed. They're happy with what happened in Iran, led by Israel. But they need to see that political horizon. And for that political horizon to be there, that can enable the Israeli-Saudi normalization, which would change literally the future of this region. And we're missing that opportunity as well. And by the way, I agree with Netanyahu that we need to win the war to get the Saudi normalization. We do, but we need to win the war, offer a political option and roadmap, and get the Saudi normalization. But it's not just two, it's three.
Israel's government rejects any mention of Palestinian statehood or the framework of two nation states for two people, and has been taking action to prevent a Palestinian state from coming into being. But the world insists on that vision, so a diplomatic clash, particularly during the UN General Assembly in New York, seems inevitable. Most Israelis are very worried, but there is a scenario where such recognition could serve Israel's long-term interests, at least as I understand them. Thank you for listening.